A very interesting summer holiday. The sun was a sovereign, a gold-plated king, as the children from Elm Tree House began their big fling. In the heart of Thamesmead, where the concrete is gray, Tracy was shouting, "Get a move on, I say. We're off to the forest, so don't be aslant. We're dodging the boredom and the usual can't." Tracy was known for her lax, easy way. She wasn't for rules or for ruining the day. Beside her stood Tyler, his afro a crown, the coolest young traveler to ever leave town. "It's peak, man," he whispered. "This trip is the vibe." As Tracy continued her cheerful diatribe. Little Harley was 5, a sensitive boy whose orange-clad presence brought everyone joy. He sat in the van with a worried-ish face, clutching his toy in a tight-ish embrace. His giraffe, named Jeff, was a long-necked delight, held close as the engine roared loud with its might. Harley preferred silence, he hated the din, and nestled his chin where the plush fur was thin. Mike gripped the wheel with a sturdy, firm hand, the finest explorer in all of the land. "Sure, don't you worry," Mike cried with a laugh. "We're halfway to Suffolk and then some, by half." Nick sat in the back with her ponytail tight, her blonde hair catching glimmers of light. Beside her was Isaac, her brother so bold, whose Yorkshire-born stories were often retold. "I'm laking for fun," Isaac said with a grin, as he tossed a blue candy drop straight in his chin. Nick checked the itinerary, her mind in full gear, for the schedules and plans that she held very dear. "I'm very excited too, but we have to hold our horses," Nick said with a sigh, looking out at the clouds and the wide summer sky. She was checking the map with a look of concern, for Nick had many a lesson to learn. At Elvedon Forest, the air was like wine, scented with needles and branches of pine. Tracy sat down with a postcard to write, her black inked pen moving with all of its might. But Otis the manager, rigid and tall, was watching the group from the edge of the hall. He wore a green blazer, formal and neat, and scowled at the dirt on the children's young feet. Otis was antagonistic, bitter and cold, hating the young and ignoring the old. He barked out a rule about quiet and peace, but Tracy's own calmness would never cease. Tracy took not the slightest notice of Otis. She gave him the cold shoulder. Daisy and Lily May huddled close by, with a mischievous glint in each young girl's eye. Daisy wore pink from her hat to her shoe, while Lily May's ribbons were purple and new. Along with young Nick, they were quite the three, a trio of chaos as wild as can be. The others were calm, but these three were a nightmare, causing a ruckus and giving a fright glare. "Tracy's too busy," Daisy whispered with glee. "She hasn't even looked at the forest or tree." Lily May nodded, her brown hair in a swing. "Let's find us a bucket or some watery thing." Nick wandered off to the edge of the wood, where a heavy-set gate made of timber wood stood. She wanted to see where the giants did roam, far from the safety of Elm Tree House home. The Shire horses were legends, notorious and vast, with shadows that they over the meadow did cast. Nick reached for the latch with a curious hand, the most reckless girl in the whole of the land. "I'll just have a peek," she whispered so low, as the summer wind started to softly-ish blow. The latch was quite heavy, the bolt was quite old, but Nick was determined, and Yorkshire-born bold. While Nick was away, the two others did creep, while Tracy's attention was buried so deep. Daisy and Lily May, pistols in hand, prepared for the wettest assault in the land. They took aim at Tracy, so calm and so chill, and gave her a soaking against her own will. Splosh went the water, and splash went the stream, as Tracy woke up from her postcard-ish dream. She didn't get angry, she didn't get mad, she just laughed at the fun that the nightmare girls had. But Otis was watching, exacerbated and grim, as the cacophony of giggles rose up toward him. Suddenly, through the woods came a thundering sound, as 20 great shire horses shook the dry ground. Nick had forgotten to fasten the gate, and now the great giants were tempting their fate. They charged through the clearing, a galloping tide, with no one to stop them from coming inside. Their hooves were like drums on the dry, dusty ground, and they didn't make even a single soft sound until they reached gravel and started to race, a herd of huge horses all over the place. Nick stood in the gateway, her face pale as snow, as she watched the great herd of the shire horses go. The horses invaded the lodge in a blur, with a frantic-ish neigh and a rhythmic-ish stir. They trotted through doorways and sniffed at the fruit, while one tried to nibble at Otis's boot. Otis was fuming, his face turning red. "There are horses in here." "There are horses," he said. He was strict and antagonistic, a bully at heart, who wanted the Elm Tree House crew to depart. A chestnut shire horse nudged a lamp with its head as Otis turned purple and wished they were dead. The lodge was a mess of huge hooves and long hair, and Otis was gasping for Elvedon air. "Expelled," Otis bellowed, his voice like a gale. "This whole expedition is destined to fail." He pointed at Mike with a finger of doom as the chestnut shire horse took up half of the room. Mike tried to reason, to offer a plea. "Sure, Otis, my man, can't you let them be free?" But Otis was stubborn, a mountain of spite, who wouldn't be happy until they took flight. "Get out of my forest. Get out of my sight. You've ruined my protocol here in the light." He hated the children, he hated the fun, and he wouldn't be finished until they were done. Mike tried to negotiate. "Otis, please wait." But the manager's anger was far too much weight. "If you're not out by sunset," the mean man did swear, "I'll set the farm pigs on you all, I declare." He sneered at the children, his antagonism deep, as if all their memories weren't worth a keep. "The swine are quite hungry, they're fierce and they're fast, and this little visit will surely be your last." Otis stood rigid, a pillar of hate, as he watched the group pack by the lodge's main gate. He relished the power, he relished the pain, as the Elm Tree House holiday went down the drain. The journey back home was a somber affair, with a heavy-set silence that hung in the air. Tyler sat staring at trees passing by, with a look of deep gloom in his dark brown-ish eye. He clutched at his backpack, his favorite green, the unhappiest traveler that ever was seen. Beside him was Harley, still hugging his Jeff, as if all the world had gone suddenly deaf. No one would speak and no one would play. They had lost the best part of their summer-ish day. The minibus hummed as it rolled through the night, leaving the forest and leaving the light. Back at the junkyard, the name for their home, Nick walked through the halls like a sad-looking gnome. The group was ecstatic to leave her behind, for Nick's big mistake was the first on their mind. Daisy and Lily Mae gave her the cold shoulder too, a silent-ish treatment that made Nick feel blue. They blanked her in hallways and ignored her at tea, the loneliest girl that you ever did see. Nick felt the weight of her terrible mistake, a burden too heavy for one girl to take. She tried to say sorry, she tried to explain, but her efforts were met with a silent disdain. Lily Mae whispered to Daisy that night, beneath the low glow of a flickering light, "Nick is a nightmare, she's ruined the fun, and now our whole summer is over and done." Daisy nodded, her Sussex-born pride feeling quite empty and hollow inside. "I'm leaving," said Lily. "I'm heading for north. I'll take my adventures and carry them forth. Bedford is calling. I've heard it is grand. The finest-ish place in the whole of the land." Daisy agreed with a determined-ish nod. "We'll go on our own, though it's risky and odd." They packed up their rucksacks with biscuits and juice, letting their runaway spirits go loose. Nick heard the whispers and heard the big plan and thought, "I must help them as fast as I can." She went to the kitchen to cook them a treat, to make their forgiveness feel tasty and sweet. Isaac was there, with his Yorkshire-born grit, watching his sister for a little-ish bit. "What's tha doin', Nick?" he asked with a frown, as she pulled a red jar of some peppers-ish down. I'm making a feast, Nick said with a spark, to brighten the mood and to lighten the dark. But she didn't see labels, her eyes were too fast, and the peppers she chose would make everyone gasp. The potato and sausage was served on a plate, but the heat of the dinner was far too much weight. Gina took a bite, and her eyes opened wide, as if a volcano were erupting inside. Lord ha' mercy, she cried with a gasp, her voice like a sudden and rhythmic-ish rasp. This food is on fire, it's hot like the sun. What has our little Nick Taylor gone and done? Mike coughed and he spluttered, reaching for tea. It's the hottest-ish meal in the whole history. Nick realized her error. Her peppers were chilies, and everyone felt like a bunch of hot sillies. Mike and Gina sat down by the light of the moon, for the budget was low and the end was too soon. We can't find a holiday, Mike said with a sigh. The prices are soaring right up to the sky. Gina looked round at the garden so gray. Maybe a holiday here is the way? They planned to make fun in the Thamesmead-ish sun, even if travels were over and done. But Nick was distracted, her mind on the flight of the two nightmare girls in the middle of night. She knew she must stop them, she knew she must go. Even if Mike and Gina said no. Nick followed the girls to the coach in the dark, as they headed for Bedford and Woburnish Park. She boarded the vehicle, hidden from view, doing the thing that she knew she must do. Back at the home, Tracy found the small note and felt like a sailor on a sinking-ish boat. They've gone, she cried out, her Cockney voice high. Lily May, Daisy, and Nick. Oh my, oh my. Only those three are a nightmare, I swear. The others are easy, but those three are a flare. She grabbed for the keys, and she grabbed for her coat, as the panic rose up in her Cockney-ish throat. On the coach to the north, Nick sat very still, as the vehicle climbed up a gentle-ish hill. She watched Lily May, and she watched Daisy too, wondering what on earth she would eventually do. They were chatting and laughing, unaware of the spy, as the stars started twinkling up in the sky. Nick felt like a hero, a guardian of old, though her feet were quite shaky and her hands were quite cold. She knew they were heading for Bedford-ish ground, where the secrets of summer were yet to be found. Her Yorkshire-born heart was steady and true, as the coach rumbled on through the midnight-ish blue. Tracy and Mike were in hot-ish pursuit in a minibus filled with a Yorkshire-born root. Isaac was there, and young Frankie was too, as the silver-ish vehicle rapidly flew. Faster, cried Tracy, we're losing the trail. But Mike knew the engine was starting to fail. Frankie, the Geordie, let out a small moan. The engine is making a canny-ish groan. Tracy clutched at the dash with a worried-ish face as they sped through the night at a frantic-ish pace. They were chasing the nightmare trio so bold, through the damp-looking night and the Bedford-ish cold. But the minibus sputtered and came to a stop, with a sudden-ish clatter and a rhythmic-ish hop. Out of diesel, Mike groaned with a thud of his head. We're stranded in Bedford and should be in bed. Gus sat in the back with a serious stare. The probability, Mike, is a lack of repair. My Texan-born logic suggests we are stuck. A most unfortunate instance of terrible luck. Frankie just sighed with a Geordie-born shrug. Way, aye, man, we're stuck like a bug in a rug. They sat on the roadside, in Bedford-ish mud, as the hopes for a rescue became a dull thud. Meanwhile, in a field that was misty and wide, Nick found where the two nightmare girls did hide. But they had met Lola, a woman so kind, the loveliest lady that you'd ever find. Lola was wearing a hat made of straw, the friendliest person that Nick ever saw. I've lost all my sheep, Lola said with a cry. They've run through the meadow and into the sky. Nick didn't hesitate, she jumped to her feet. I'll catch them for you, it'll be a real treat. She herded the creatures with skill and with grace, a look of determination all over her face. Lola was grateful, her eyes were aglow. You've saved all my sheep from the Bedford-ish snow. Well, Grass, she corrected, with a wink and a grin. Now let the real holiday truly begin. I own Woburn Park, just a mile-ish away, and I'd like you and your family to come here and stay. She sent out a truck for the minibus crew, and soon they were gathered and starting anew. Half price for you all, Lola said with a cheer. The best-looking family I've seen in a year. Mike shook her hand with a feeling of grace, a smile of triumph all over his face. At Woburn Park, everything was divine, with safari-ish sights and with branches of pine. Frankie and Rick were the first to arrive, feeling remarkably glad and alive. Frankie, the Geordie, went, "Way-aye!" with glee. This place is as canny can be. Rick, from Durham, was nodding his head, wearing his favorite shirt that was bright-looking red. "This is champion, Mara," was all that he said, as he looked at the big-ish and soft-looking bed. They had lodges and lions and a pool that was blue, and everyone knew what they wanted to do. The holiday ended with sun and with spray on a glorious, shimmering, wonderful day. Gina stood by the pool in her turquoise green scarf, ready to jump and to splash and to laugh. But Gus was behind her, his face quite profound, as he moved with a quiet and serious sound. With a "Howdy, ma'am," and a Texan-style shove, he pushed her right in with a brotherly love. "Lord ha' mercy!" Gina shrieked as she fell, with a splash that was louder than any church bell. It was an interesting summer, they all did agree, the happiest family in the whole of the S.E.